Hi guys, I'm Andrew and welcome back to the Fragrance Explorer. So today I'm going to be doing my first brand overview, and for today we're going to be looking at Rook perfumes. So if you haven't heard of this brand, you want to hear more about it, stay tuned. So Rook Perfumes, it was set up in 2018 by a guy called Nadeem. He's quite an interesting character because he originally trained as a doctor, then spent some time in the West End acting, and now is a full-time doctor in emergency medicine. And Rook Perfumes is kind of his side business, his branching into perfumery and kind of widening his skill set. So it's a niche slash indie house. Obviously he's not a designer, and the quality of his fragrances definitely do reflect that kind of title. They're priced around the right level and they're fantastic quality. So what makes his brand different to others? So when we talk about fragrances like, for example, Mont Blanc Explorer, when people talk about that fragrance they go, oh, it smells like Aventus, or Prada L'Homme smells like Dior Homme. We just say that based off notes and associations with the fragrances. Whereas what Nadeem's trying to do with Rook is to elicit nostalgia, to elicit memories, to kind of transport you to somewhere else. So when you smell a fragrance, you're not like, oh, it smells like another fragrance. It's more like, that smells like a walk through the park, that smells like the classroom from when I was a child, that kind of thing. So it's meant to be really powerful, very visceral memories that you're trying to get triggered by these fragrances. So in terms of branding, it's really nice, really minimalistic, really monochromatic. So this is an example box. As you can see, monochromatic, black and white, nice and clean, and the design revolves around these triangles. So there's currently 3 fragrances in the line, Rook, Undergrowth and Forest, and they all use that pattern slightly differently. So Rook uses a single large triangle, Undergrowth uses these 4 or 5 smaller triangles on the bottom, and then Forest takes it even further and has lots of small triangles along the bottom. So there's definitely quite a clear brand identity. Again, in terms of bottles, this is a bottle of Undergrowth. So very minimalistic, very clean, just a clear glass, nice black cap, and you've got the same triangle print on the bottom here as on the box. So like that a lot. So what do these triangles represent? This was something for me that I was unsure of when I first bought my first fragrance, or even started looking at the brand, because I thought, for something that simple, it's got to have a deeper meaning. But so I did some more research into the brand, and so the triangle represents 3 different things for Nadeem. It represents perfumery, performance, and medicine. So these are kind of the 3 cornerstones of his life. Obviously, being an actor, then being a doctor, and being a perfumer makes perfect sense. And the triangle as a shape represents equilibrium between all 3. It represents balance and how you need these things to really be your most authentic version of yourself, which I think is a really nice idea. So one of the really cool things that Nadeem's brand Rook does is these things called scent experiments. There's been 2 run so far. The most recent one involved a picture from Paul Rankin, a really renowned photographer, called the Flaming Dandelion. And what Nadeem did, kind of in conjunction with his followers over Instagram, said, well, if you look at this picture, what do you smell? Which is quite an interesting one, because a lot of us associate smells to smells, but not necessarily sounds and visual things to smell. So it was a really interesting project, I thought. And the idea was, he came up with a list of notes, combined them into a fragrance, and then sent them out to people, and they got to have a smell, see what notes they picked out, and kind of describe the memories that elicited. So Undergrowth, this is the one bottle that I own, well, the whole bottle of it. The rest I just own samples of currently, but I'm looking to purchase at least one of the other ones in the near future. So let's have a look at the notes. So in Undergrowth, we've got top notes of soil. I know, it's quite a peculiar one, but you'll get where we're going with this. Garden mint, grass. In the mid notes, we've got green notes, mandarin and orris. Orris is the root of the iris flower, and when in fragrance, people say they use iris. Actually, what they're using is orris, so in case you didn't realise. And in the base, we've got vetiver, patchouli, and white musk. So the name Undergrowth, that probably gives you some idea as to why it's got this soil note in the top. So with this fragrance, Nadeem said that he wanted to recreate the scent evoked by pulling fresh garden mint from damp earth and bottle it. And I think he's really hit the nail on the head here. This is a really, really incredible fresh fragrance. Very high in naturals. So for example, if you look on the box, it's only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes listed. Whereas if you look at something like Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue Intense Pour Homme, it's got something, I think, about 15 chemicals in it. So the way he's achieving that is by using quite a high proportion of natural ingredients rather than doing everything through aroma chemicals. Not to say that aroma chemicals and synthetic molecules are bad. Sometimes they're used for cost reasons, sometimes it's because IFA has now determined that a particular natural raw material is no longer safe to use for humans on skin. And sometimes, especially when it comes to animalistic notes like Cives and Castorum, synthetic notes allow us to experience these kind of smells but in a very sustainable, ethical way. So you don't have to kill an animal to get it, you don't have to chop down forests or habitats for animals or ecosystems in a non-environmentally friendly way. So that's just a side note there. So I think that the fact this has got a lot of naturals is a very good thing, but just because a fragrance has a higher percentage of naturals doesn't necessarily mean it's an inherently better fragrance. So what's it smell like? Let's get the right strip. Very good sprayers. They feel like they're made out of metal rather than plastic, which is quite nice, and it's got a nice matte finish on it. So what you get off the top of this straight away is that mint. And when I say mint, this is probably unlike anything you smelled before. So it's quite common for fragrances nowadays to have mint in them to give them a bit of freshness, a bit of projection, a bit of sparkle. But if you look at something like Versace Eros or Chanel Allure Homme Sport Eau Extreme, they use mint, but it's quite synthetic smelling, it's quite artificial. Whereas this really does smell like you just got a handful of garden mint leaves, pull them out of the soil, and just crush them in your hands and smell them. It's incredibly fresh. You do get a little bit of that soil, which I think is coming from the patchouli he's using in here. It's not like a dirty, challenging earthy smell, because I think sometimes earthy smells can be a bit on the challenging side. This is more kind of warm and comforting and just reminds you of being outdoors rather than kind of having your head buried in a pile of soil. But for me, I think one of the biggest things that I pick up on this is geosmin. So geosmin, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, so I apologise in advance. Geosmin is a precursor for a compound called petrichor. So especially at the moment in the UK we're having these thunderstorms, petrichor is that kind of slightly metallic smell you get in rain and in dry soil when it's moved. So this is something that Nadeem's using to really, really high standing here to give you that freshness, that slightly metallic rain, garden, wet grass note, which is beautiful. So let's have a look at the dry down. So for me, the dry down is where the fragrance is stellar. The opening's beautiful, but at the end of the day, if a fragrance smells great when you first spray it on, but after about an hour it gets really boring, then it's a bit of a waste of money in my opinion. The dry down is what you're going to be left with for the whole day, so you might as well really enjoy it. So the main thing you get in the dry down is that patchouli and the musk. It's a very kind of clean, smooth, white musk to give it a bit of elevation. The patchouli again smells really, really natural. It's not the kind of dark, gothic, heavy patchouli. It's more the kind of green, slightly fresh patchouli. And one of the really standout things for this fragrance for me is how the mint works throughout the fragrance. So in a lot of fragrances, the mint note kind of goes in about 10-15 minutes. It's just an opener, gives you brightness, makes it a bit fresher. But in this, you can still definitely detect the mint as you go into the dry down. It's not as prominent in the opening, but it's still definitely there. You can still detect it. So next up, we're going to be having a look at Forest. As you can see, it's just a small 3ml sample from Rook themselves. Rook does a sample set which is 3ml of Rook, Undergrowth and Forest. It's £12, so it's really reasonably priced, and the best thing of all is you get 3ml sample sizes. A lot of brands give you 1, 1.5, maybe 2 at a push, and whilst that's good for a couple of wears, I think if I'm going to be spending £100 on a bottle of fragrance, I want to wear it 3, 4, 5 times at least, different times a day, different heats, and different occasions, and just understand whether I like it or not, because a lot of the times I buy fragrances that sometimes I love them at first sight and sometimes it takes a few years to get into it. So I think that's a really good feature. Anyhow, the fragrance. So forest. The name suggests it's meant to elicit the smell of walking into a forest, that kind of the smell of the trees, the smell of the ground, that dampness but still fresh at the same time. And I think that's reflected in the notes nicely. So in the top we've got cypress and pine. In the middle we've got black pepper, incense and green notes. And in the base we've got patchouli, cedar and white musk. So let's have a smell. So off the top of this you definitely get the kind of mixture of cypress and pine. Pine is, I think, quite a misunderstood note, because a lot of people associate pine with toilet cleaner, because pine's really, really popular to fragrance cleaning chemicals. And so when some fragrances have pine in them and they've got quite a lot of artificial notes in them, you assume it's going to smell like a cleaning product. Not the case here at all. So it smells quite green and very fresh. Got a slight pepperiness, which is probably a mixture of the black pepper in the mid coming through with cypress, which itself is slightly spicy, but still very green. So yeah, really enjoyable fragrance, very fresh. The opening definitely takes you back and makes you smell like you are walking through a forest, which is fantastic. Let's have a look at the dry down. So the dry down is slightly similar to that of Undergrowth. Obviously take away the mint because that's not a note in this one anymore, and instead that's replaced by the note of cedar, which gives you that kind of woodsy feel. We've got a similar patchouli, kind of green, earthy and fresh used here as an Undergrowth, and again a really well chosen musk. So performance I get similar to, I keep saying this, I get similar to Undergrowth. Doesn't last quite as long on me, and performance kind of projection isn't as strong, but I believe that's something that Nadeem wanted to do. It's more of an ethereal scent rather than something that's constantly present, so that's fine. 6-7 hours longevity and an hour or so of projection. It just doesn't project as hard, if that makes sense. So last but not least we've got Rook by Rook. Great name. So Rook is Nadeem's personal scent. It's like what Roja Dove did with Haute Luxe. It's kind of the fragrance that Nadeem created because it's what his perfect smell would be like, and he's now released it as part of his collection. So in the top we've got birch tar and tobacco. In the middle we've got castoreum, cardamom, ginger, civet and argarwood. And in the base we've got incense, ambrettes, otherwise known as muskmallow, ambergris, gaiac wood and musk. So in comparison to the quite fresh green fragrances that you've got with Undergrowth and Forest, Rook by comparison is quite fiery and animalistic and heavy and leathery and kind of dirty, which is quite a nice juxtaposition between the two ends of the range. So to describe this fragrance, Nadeem says, "A blast of all is the engine fired. A vintage leather jacket laced with tobacco. A diplomat dressed as a punk rocker." And I think that juxtaposition, that kind of image of a diplomat and a punk rocker together really sums up this fragrance. You've kind of got a slightly gentlemanly, very masculine edge, but equally it's quite anarchistic. It's not playing by the rules. It's quite heavy on animal notes, which we haven't seen much since the 80s, since the days of kind of Curus and Anateus by Chanel. And in a way you could kind of say it smells a little bit like a gentleman's smoking club. If that appeals to you, fantastic. So let's see how it smells. Wow. So out of all the fragrances, this is by far the biggest hitter. Kind of, you spray that and even without the strip anywhere near me, it's just bang, hit me in the face. So what you get off the top of this, you definitely got the birch tar, which is similar to what gives that smokiness to Aventus, and tobacco, but to me this just smells like oil and fire and brimstone, and kind of, if you imagine going to see your granddad and he was in a leather chair with a pipe, and it's that really kind of old school masculine scent. But I can definitely see for some people this might seem a little bit in your face and too pungent at first. When I first smelled it, I had a similar opinion, and a friend of mine on Instagram said, you know what, give it some time, let it go through the dry down and wear it a few more times and you won't get super off by it. And I definitely agree. It's not my kind of scent personally, but if you like smoky, incense heavy, leather, animal notes, that kind of really hyper, almost 80s masculine but more modern, I think this is a fantastic fragrance. Have a smell of the dry down. So yeah, once you get into the dry down, that initial harshness coming from the birch tar and the tobacco goes away, and you're left with a more mellow, woody base. A little bit of incense in there, you've still got some smoke, but it's nowhere near as prominent as it was at the start of the fragrance. So performance and projection wise, this is by far the strongest performer out of the lot. I can easily get 10 to 12 hours on my skin, 2 if not 3 hours of projection. Again, it's a really, really strong fragrance. So I wouldn't advise using this in any kind of scenario where you need to be discreet, because this is a fragrance to get you noticed. And similar with Fahrenheit and that kind of generation of fragrances, this is the man that knows what he wants. He's confident, he's assertive, and it's a statement fragrance. And you've got to be ready to wear it, otherwise it will wear you. Simple. So on to my final thoughts. So I hope you learned a bit about Rook perfumes throughout the course of this video. It's a really, really fantastic indie brand, and as much as I love designers and bigger niche houses, I think that, let's be honest, the fragrance world has been pretty stagnant for the last few years. It's just flanker after flanker after flanker. Kind of old DNAs are getting rehashed, reinterpreted, but nothing that's truly creative or that inspiring. And that's what I think houses like Rook are doing to the fragrance industry. They're giving you new smells, they're giving you a new take on things, and it's definitely what the industry needs right now. So I think as much as we all do enjoy supporting these bigger brands, we really, really need to do our bit to get involved and help these indie perfumers, because otherwise, if you don't support these smaller companies like Rook, all you're going to have is all these larger brands, and if they monopolise the market, then that just kind of stifles creativity, unfortunately. So do I think it's worth it? £2 per milliliter essentially is what you're getting here, which is a little bit pricey. At the time of filming this, if you go on to the Rook website, there's this thing called Fragrance Picker. I'm not sure how long it's going to last for, but as of now it is. And it's a little quiz. It'll see what you like the smell of with pictures and memories, and based on that, it'll kind of recommend what it thinks the best fragrance is for you. And using that, you get 30% off. So at £70 a bottle, really, really good value for money. In terms of how it's put together, the quality of the ingredients, it's easily one of the best in my collection. And I look forward to buying a bottle of Forest next. Personally, Rook isn't for me, but I'm not a massive fan of intense smoky fragrances. But if that's what you're into, then I really recommend it. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. And any questions, just drop it in the comments below. See you next time. Bye.